This Kansas City Royals team is pesky. They do not go away, and quite frankly, it annoys me to play them. But somehow, some way, the Orioles are done with the Royals, at least in the regular season. And they came away somehow with 2 series wins. And on today's episode, I'll recap how they won 2 of 3 in KC over the weekend. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Orioles fans, today is Monday, April 22nd, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we are going to recap the Orioles series win over the weekend against the Kansas City Royals, as after dropping the opening game on Friday 9-4, they came back to win 9-7 on Saturday, and finished off the series win with a 5-0 victory on Sunday. I'll recap the games, get you the 5 things you need to know from all 3 outings, including some big days for Anthony Santander and for Cole Irvin, and some struggles for some of the guys in the bullpen specifically. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by eBay Motors. From brakes to exhaust kits and beyond, eBay Motors has over 122 million parts to keep your ride or die alive. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to bring home that big win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. So let's jump into a series win for the Orioles, taking 2 out of 3 from the Royals and the O's, now 14-7 through 21 games this season. That is a pace of well over 100 wins for the year. As I mentioned, dropped the Friday game, but they won Saturday. They won Sunday. They did it somehow, especially on Saturday. And despite how pesky and annoying and somewhat lucky this Royals team can get, the O's found a way to win both series against Kansas City. They are, at least for the regular season, done with the Royals. And I'll tell you right now, I would be very happy if the Orioles do not have to see the Royals again this year. I am going to be very happy if they get to the postseason and they don't have to face Kansas City in the postseason. I don't want to see this team again. It annoys me to play them. Things go their way. You just can't. It's hard to get 27 outs against this team. The O's found a way to do it 4 out of 6 times, and I will take that. So let's begin with the most recent one. Let's begin with the Sunday victory. Orioles 5 and the Kansas City Royals nothing on Sunday. First shutout win of the O's this season. They took the rubber match to win the series and get to 14-7. I'm going to start by getting you the 5 things you need to know from Sunday's win in Kansas City. And the first thing you need to know is Cole Irvin had arguably, or maybe not even arguably, his best start in an Oriole uniform. Had multiple guys bearing down on him. You know, even though Tyler Wells is on the injured list, doesn't look like it's going to be a super long IL stint. Albert Suarez comes up, pitches very well, stays in the rotation. John Means very close to being activated. Kyle Bradish made a rehab start in AAA on Sunday, over 60 pitches. He's getting closer to the big leagues. Cade Povich has been amazing in AAA. Cole Irvin is hearing all of these footsteps for his rotation spot. And quite frankly, he hasn't been very good through his first 3 starts. And the O's need to find a way to win a series. They send Irvin out there against a Royals team that had already hit him around a little bit a couple of weeks ago when he faced Kansas City back in Baltimore. And Colton delivered again for, I think, his best start in an Oriole uniform. Irvin goes 6 2/3 scoreless innings, 4 hits. Now, only 2 strikeouts to 2 walks. It's not like he was mowing down hitters left and right, but he did it the Cole Irvin way. 93 pitches. Royals had, they hit him a little bit. They had 8 hard hit balls against him in 6 2/3 innings, but not anything crazy. And not only was it his best start, it was also his longest start in an Oriole uniform. He recorded 20 outs. That's the first time he had done that as an Oriole. Only the 3rd time with the Orioles. Remember, they acquired Irvin in a January 2023 trade. He was with the O's for a good chunk of last year, although he spent a good chunk in AAA as well, and then began this year in the rotation this year. He had only 2 starts last year where he even finished 6 innings with the O's. Back on July 7th in Minnesota, he went 6 1/3 innings and allowed 1 run. And then August 25th at home against the Rockies last year, 6 innings and 4 runs. Those are the only other 2 times Irvin has gone 6 or more with the Orioles. And the thing about that is not the pitcher that the Orioles went and got. When they acquired him from Oakland, he'd had back-to-back solid seasons, making 30-plus starts, approaching 200 innings. In his final season with the Oakland A's in 2022, he made 30 starts. 19 of those 30 starts, he lasted at least 6 innings. He's now only had 3 of those in an Oriole uniform. He's really kind of been a different pitcher. He has not been the guy the Orioles went and got, but I said it at Locked On Orioles on Twitter on Sunday, like this was the Cole Irvin the Orioles thought they were getting when they made that trade a couple of winters ago, and that is who showed up on Sunday. And listen, it's not swing and miss stuff when Cole Irvin is at his best. Again, he only had 2 strikeouts despite getting 20 outs. Heck, he only had 4 swings and misses. 43 swings by Royals hitters against Irvin on Sunday. They only missed 4 times. 3 of them on the four-seam fastball, 1 on the changeup. That was it for Cole Irvin. And also, his velocities were way down from what we've seen this year. His curveball was much loopier and slower. The sinker was 90 to 91. He's been more 92, 93, 94 this year. The four-seamer also is 90 to 91. That's been a pitch that's been 93, 94 at times this season. All the velos across the board were like 1 to 2 miles per hour down. That's usually concerning, except he does that and has by far his best start. And this is something I talked a little bit about when I've been discussing Cole Irvin. We know he had that velo bump when he first came into spring training. He was like throwing 96. We were like, who is this guy? And then we saw him not have the 96, but have the comfortable 94 to 95 in his first few starts, and he was struggling. And I talked about how this happened to John Means. I believe it was in the COVID season in 2020. Means had come off that really, really great rookie season in 2019. And in 2020, he added a bunch of velocity and he was, up to the mid 90s. And Means had his worst season when he was throwing 94, 95. The next year, he went back down to kind of that 92 range. And what does he do that next year? He's great again. He throws that no-hitter in Seattle. And it's kind of like, Means' pitches work the best when his velocity is around the 92 area instead of 94. That seems to be the case also for Cole Irvin. When his fastballs are more around that 91 zone instead of the 93, 94, they just move more. They're harder to hit. He's more effective. He has better command of them at that speed. And that's okay. And if Irvin's going to do that, that's fine. He also relied on his curveball. His curveball has been by far, like leaps and bounds, his best pitch this season. Guys have barely hit that curveball. He said, okay, that's going to be my number 1 pitch. 30 of his 93 pitches were curveballs. Now, granted, 29 were sinkers, so it wasn't like a big time number 1 pitch, but he used it the most. Only one other time in his career has Cole Irvin thrown more than 30 curveballs in a start. He threw 32 of them in his final start with the A's back in 2022. And that curveball worked. Now, it didn't get a lot of swings and misses, but there was soft contact put in play by the Royals. It allowed Irvin to get outs early in counts. It allowed him to breeze through innings. And then the sinker was there for him. He had really good command of it. And he just kind of combined those 2 pitches to get it done. And even if Irvin's pitching like this, he's not going to pitch like this every time. But if you can get this every couple of times and you can also get 5 or 6 okay innings, he's just here to hold down the fort until the grouping of Wells and Means and Bradish and, maybe Suarez, these guys kind of get healthy, figure it out. They settle this rotation probably by the end of May, beginning of June. Irvin's just going to be there until then to help out. And if he can throw in starts like this every once in a while, that is huge. And the other thing is, everybody's like, oh, Cole Irvin's pitching. Here's an automatic loss. Even with his struggles earlier in the season, the Orioles are now 3-1 in Irvin's 4 starts. So he keeps the O's in the game and allows them to win ball games. He just took it to another level Sunday. And that was fun to watch. Second thing you need to know from Sunday's Oriole victory is that Colton Cowser and Jordan Westberg hitting 7th and 8th in your order kind of seems unfair for other teams. I was talking to a Royals fan, shout out to Chip on Sunday, who was just like, I never want to see Jordan Westberg hitting 8th in a lineup ever again. I get it. Westberg and Cowser going back-to-back in the second inning to get the scoring started against Royals. Starter Lugo back-to-back slow homers, put the O's up 2-0. Started with Cowser, who, funny enough, after accidentally throwing that ball into the fountain on Saturday night, after it was a special ball for Craig Kimbrel, his save that tied him with Billy Wagner, which we'll get to, he then hit a home run into the fountain on Sunday. Funny enough. But Cowser off the bat, just absolutely scorches a baseball in the third inning. 112 off the bat, 430 feet, a no-doubter for a home run. And then Westberg followed up with basically the same thing. 111 off the bat, 433 feet, also a no-doubter. And they just went back-to-back for a couple of long balls. And you look at this Oriole order with Cowser, and their best lineup is the one they once again put out on Sunday. Henderson, Rutschman, O'Hearn, Santander, Mountcastle, Mullins, Cowser, Westberg, Holiday. Like, that's an awesome lineup to look at. You got Cowser hitting seventh. He's hitting 373 with an 1195 OPS. And then you got Westberg hitting eighth. He's hitting 333 with a 1031 OPS. That is unfair to have those two bats at the bottom of the lineup. And yet, that is what the O's have now. It is a little bit spoiled with these young hitters that they've got on this team. Third thing you need to know from the Orioles' 5-0 win on Sunday is that the young guys are swinging it well, and it's fun to watch. But don't forget about the veterans who survived the rebuild, because those veterans were huge this weekend, and they were especially huge on Sunday. Ryan Mountcastle and Cedric Mullins each had 2 hit days. O's also got big contributions on hits from Anthony Santander and Ramon Urias. Those 4 guys combined to go 6 for 14 with a double, a triple, and 2 RBIs in this game. And shout out specifically to Ramon Urias, who has basically been relegated to a full-time bench role. I mean, he did start Saturday's game, had a 1 for 5. He did end up appearing in all 3 games in Kansas City this weekend. But when he appeared as a pinch hitter on Friday night, that was his first at-bat in a week. He hadn't appeared since he was a pinch hitter in the blowout loss to the Brewers last Friday night. So, he's not playing a whole lot. And it makes sense, as most of the guys are better than Ramon Urias that are on this team, but he still provides value to the Orioles. And that is why he is still here. And he came up with a huge pinch hit single. Brandon Hyde going to him off the bench. There was a lefty with runners on first and third and 2 outs. Ryan O'Hearn coming up. Orioles try to hide O'Hearn from lefty, so they go to Urias, and Urias delivers with a pinch hit RBI single to give the O's a nice little insurance run at the top of the 9th inning. And shout out to Urias, who started the season 2 for 22, and in a similar way to Austin Hayes, kind of played his way out of the lineup as the young guys were really hitting. Well, since then, Urias is on a 6-game hitting streak, and more specifically, he is 5 for his last 10 after the pinch hit RBI single on Sunday. And so if you've got him even able to produce off the bench, and of course we know play good defense at second and third base, he's still going to help this Orioles team. So shout out to those veterans. Fourth thing you need to know from Sunday's victory is that, yes, Jackson Holliday does continue to struggle. It was another 0 for Jackson, 0 for 3. He did draw his second walk, but he also did strike out. The strikeout was a pretty rough one. Bases loaded, 1 out, 3-2 pitch, just takes a fastball right down the middle for a called strike 3. Luckily, the O's did end up getting one of those runs home on a little earlier in the inning, but could have been more if Jackson had delivered. And he still does have the 1 hit. It hasn't been very fun to watch. I will say that pretty easily to say right now. I mean, he's not swinging the bat well. However, it's not time to panic. On one hand, he's playing a fantastic second base. Already, he has 3 outs above average at second base. That's top 5 in baseball. And if you take into account the fact that he wasn't here for the first week and change, he's been arguably one of the best defensive second basemen in baseball since he got called up. And that has been huge value for the Orioles. And like it's done for Jorge Mateo and Ramon Urias and others in the past, the defense, at the very least, can keep Holliday in the lineup, even if the bat's struggling. And, he was robbed on a line drive that should have been an RBI single in the 5th inning, hit a ball good 96 off the bat. And here's the thing. He's not being sent down. I'm seeing so many people say, oh, you got to send him down. He's not ready. Do y'all just forget things that happened more than 5 minutes ago? Do you remember that when Adley Rutschman came up in 2022, for those first 3 weeks or so, he looked completely lost at the plate. Every single at-bat, he rolled over a ground ball to second base, every single time, like clockwork. Gunnar Henderson last year was really bad. He was hitting well under 200 for the first 2 months of the season. Y'all said, send him down, send him down. He won AL Rookie of the Year. This is an elite talent. Holliday, who had less time in the minors than Adley or Gunnar, is younger than Adley or Gunnar when those guys came up, but could arguably have just as much talent as those two. Give him some time. What you need him to do right now is A, learn how to fail. This is a guy who's never really failed in his baseball career. It's happening for the first time. You got to learn how to do it. If he goes back down to AAA, he's probably going to start hitting again, but not helping the Orioles and not really going to learn that failure and how to break out of a slump, break out of a failure. And number two, his obvious problem right now is hitting big league pitching. You know where you can't learn to hit big league pitching? AAA, because they've only got AAA pitching down there. In the big leagues, you've got big league pitching. And I'm seeing a lot of comments like the Orioles can't afford to keep him in the lineup. The Orioles can't afford to continue to let him hit out of it. Did you notice when I just mentioned what the Orioles 7 and 8 hitters are doing? Cowser and Westberg? Have you noticed that the Orioles are now 8 and 3 since calling Jackson Holliday up, despite the fact that he has one hit and he's been in the lineup almost every day? I'd be totally fine if for a little bit Holliday just goes into kind of a full platoon, which means he would still play the majority of the time. He would start against righties, but against left-handed starters, he starts on the bench, which is what they did in Saturday's game, and the O's still scored 9 runs without him. And in most of those games, he'll probably get a chance to pinch hit later anyway when a right-handed reliever comes in. That's totally fine for a little bit while he figures it out. Then he breaks out of the slump. Then you start putting him back in there against lefties, and he's your everyday second baseman. Send him down? Did you not watch what happened to exactly these other top prospects? It's happening to Jackson. He is going to break out of it. And the Orioles can afford to put him in there because they're 8 and 3 with him in the lineup. He's going to break out of it. It's going to be fun to watch when it happens. Yeah, it's a little rough at times now, but he's only going to learn how to hit big league pitching in the big leagues. And trust me, the O's are going to keep him here. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles series clinching win over the Royals on Sunday is that the bullpen had a great bounce back day. After Cole Irvin came out of the game, Jacob Webb came in, got a couple of outs. Danny Klum got a couple of outs, and Dylan Tate finished it off in the ninth to complete the shutout for the Orioles. Yes, they did allow a couple of walks and a hit in that span, but no runs over that 2 1/3 innings for the bullpen. And that was a great, great bounce back for the O's, because what happened on Friday and Saturday was not great performances from the bullpen. And they were still able to win it on Saturday despite that. But what looked like was going to be a blowout win turned into a nail biter on Saturday night. And coming up next, I'll recap what happened in that one and how the O's still managed to win that game despite some concerning things coming out of that pen. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. That's the formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber and not cash. So with all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. And this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by Monopoly Go, which is becoming one of my favorite games to play because, quite frankly, here's the thing. I've been tracking leaderboards all the time, keeping my eye on the scores, putting all my heart into it, and super pumped. It's fun to see who's on top. You can explore hundreds of Monopoly boards with the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times, and it's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly, and you can play it anywhere. You can charge rent on iconic properties, just like in classic Monopoly, or you can charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, or go after their Monopoly money by pulling a bank heist and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. But my favorite part is the leaderboards. We can see who is a Monopoly tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. So get yourself on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play. So the Orioles were able to get the series win with that victory on Sunday, but it was only because they held on for a 9-7 win on Saturday that at that point evened up the series at 1 game apiece. And I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know from Saturday's 9-7 victory over the Royals. And the first thing you need to know is The Orioles were all over the young stud lefty Cole Ragans in this game. The O's scoring 7 runs in the second inning against Ragans, forcing him out of the game in this one in the second inning. He couldn't even finish 2. Ragans, who has been incredible this year, came into this game with a 1.93 ERA on the season and had absolutely torched the Orioles 2 weeks ago, 6 1/3 scoreless innings when he pitched against the O's in Baltimore. He's been one of the best young pitchers in baseball so far this year, and the O's have just been flummoxed by him. And 2 weeks later, they had a completely different plan, and they jumped all over Cole Ragans in this game, who lasted just an inning and 2/3, 7 runs on 9 hits, and threw 62 pitches. The Orioles made him throw 49 pitches in the second inning, and he only got 2 outs. He couldn't even finish the inning. They had to go to the bullpen in the second. I mean, what a run it was by Orioles hitters in that second inning. Just going to read out what they did. Westberg single, Hayes flyout, Urias double, McCann single, Mateo strikeout, Gunnar single, Rutschman single, Mountcastle single, Santander double, Westberg single, Hayes walk, Urias ground out, finally ends the inning, and the Orioles get 7 runs on the board. And the most impressive thing really was what they did against the changeup, because that changeup from Ragans is filthy, and it dominated the Orioles in that start 2 weeks ago. But in this one, it was different. Now, he did still get a couple of swings and misses on that changeup, and you understand why. It's probably his best pitch, but the Orioles were able to put it in play. He threw 10 changeups. There were 4 swings and misses, 1 foul ball, but 5 of them were put in play. The Orioles attacked that changeup. They did not take any of the 10 changeups. They swung at all 10, and they did some damage on those 5 balls that they put in play. And he still got some outs on it. He got some strikeouts, some swings and misses, but they couldn't even touch the changeup. They couldn't even put it in play, it seemed like 2 weeks ago. The Orioles seemingly looked for that changeup with their right-handed batters. They attacked, and it worked. And shout out to Ryan Fuller and Matt Barkshalty and the Orioles lineup for just doing something different 2 weeks later with all the same hitters in the order and knocking him out of the game in the second inning. I mean, that was absolutely huge for that game, for this series. What a performance against one of the best young pitchers in baseball. And the second thing you need to know from Saturday's 9-7 win is that it was really Anthony Santander who kind of led the charge the whole way in this game. First 3-hit game for Santander on the season as he goes 3 for 5 with 3 doubles, 2 RBIs, 2 hard hit balls, and a strikeout. He followed it up with a big triple and then scoring a run on Sunday. Santander had one of the biggest hits of the day, was when the game had gotten much closer, and he came up with a huge insurance RBI double in the 8th inning. But Santander, all of a sudden, after kind of a slow start to the year, in his last 5 games, he is swinging the bat much better. He's now 8 for 19. He's got 4 doubles, a triple, a homer. He's driven in 4 runs and 2 walks to 2 strikeouts. Like, he's swinging the bat much, much better. And he had a pretty big slump last April as well, and then broke out of it. The reason why he's been slumping this year is that his 44% chase rate on the season, one of the worst in baseball. He's swinging at almost half the pitches he sees out of the zone. But even in the last 5 games when he swung it better, that chase rate is going way down. We're starting to see more and more of the Santander we know and love. And the breakouts coming, the homers are going to come, and he's starting to look like that middle of the order bat that the Orioles love. Third thing you need to know from the win on Saturday, speaking of the big rallies and the Orioles swinging it well, is Austin Hayes was kind of part of those rallies too. And then he came out of the – and for Austin Hayes, it just kind of goes from bad to worse. Left the game Saturday due to calf tightness. He was replaced by Colton Cowser in left field. And then Hayes did not play Sunday. Brandon Hyde said that he was not available for Sunday's game. Now, it doesn't seem bad enough that at least at this point, they're placing him on the injured list, but he was totally unavailable for Sunday. And it seems like they'll just reevaluate for today in Anaheim to see if Hayes can go. And this would be a game where Hayes would play tonight. I'll get to it later, but there's a lefty on the mound, Reed Detmers for the Angels. That would be a game where Hayes would start. So we'll really get to see, like, how is that calf feeling? But it's just another injury bug for Austin Hayes. And we know how bad the season had been going for Hayes, but he was finally starting to come around and looking like, finally for the first time, the good version of Austin Hayes. Since he got, if you remember back to last Saturday against the Brewers, Hayes came through with like a bloop single to right field against DL Hall. It broke like the 0 for 25 or whatever he was in. Since that single, now he's only 3 for 12 in limited at-bats, but he's got a walk and a hit by pitch and only 1 strikeout in that span. And in that span, he put 11 balls in play. 7 of them were hard hit. That's 7 of the 11 hit at 95 miles per hour or higher in terms of the exit velocity. And for Hayes, he had only done that twice in the previous part of the season. Then he does it 7 out of 11 times. So you could tell he was swinging it better. He was seeing it better. Things were moving his direction. And then he comes out of the game with an injury. Like, that's the Austin Hayes story. Like, he had a single, a walk, and a run scored in that game on Saturday before he came out. And you're just like, I mean, he had 2 hard hit balls. Like, he was just swinging it better. And you're just like, here we go again. And we already know his playing time is going to be limited. Like, he's only going to get regular at-bats against left-handed starters. And if he's now injured, if he has to go on the IL, like, he could be fully Wally pipped here, where he just doesn't have any playing time at all when he comes back. And you just got to feel for him. But he's in a tough spot right now. Hopefully he's okay. Hopefully he can play tonight, but we will certainly continue to monitor that. Fourth thing you need to know from the O's win over the Royals on Saturday is that Corbin Burns was Corbin Burns. He looked good for most of this game, except for his final pitch, but we know how pesky this Royals team is. Burns was through 5 2/3 scoreless. He issued a walk in the 6th inning that he shouldn't have, had 2 on and 2 out. Salvador Perez up. O's were up 7-0 at that point in the 6th inning. Perez was probably going to be his last batter because you had a lefty on deck and the lefty Danny Klum was ready in the pen. And Burns throws a good sinker, 97 on the inside corner. And Salvador Perez, who I think should be a Hall of Famer, just turns on that pitch, deposits it into the left field stands to kind of turn the game around, make it a 7-3 game, get the Royals back in it. But besides that pitch, I mean, and he came out after that, he was really good. And he was 1 pitch away from 6 scoreless for the O's. That's what you're looking for Corbin Burns. He ends up going 5 2/3, 3 runs, 4 hits, 4 Ks, a walk, a homer, 98 pitches for Burns, and 7 hard hit balls by the Royals hitters on Saturday. But he had 12 whiffs. The curveball looked really good. Now, the cutter wasn't the big swing and miss pitch, but it was getting kind of its usual soft contact, getting ground balls, getting pop-ups. That's what Corbin Burns loves to do with what is the best cutter in Major League Baseball. And I thought the changeup looked really good at times. He threw 20 changeups. I feel like that was actually the most changeups we've seen in one start from Burns in an Orioles uniform. I thought he mixed the stuff well. And it was just that one pitch that the Royals keep doing to everybody. Well, not everybody on the Orioles, I should say. And Perez just turned him around. But I still thought it was a good start. And Burns continues to show that he is the ace of this Orioles staff. And the fifth and final thing, though, that you do need to know is that after Burns came out, he comes out of the game. Danny Klum comes in. Klum gets the final out of the 6th. Okay, it's 7-3 going to the 7th. The O's get a run, top half. All right, it's 8-3 Orioles going to the bottom of the 7th. The bullpen is in there. You're like, you got a 5-run lead. This thing's over. We don't need to worry. Well, the fifth thing you need to know is the bullpen meltdown that ensued on Saturday. Almost sent this entire game downhill. Now, I mentioned Klum got the final out in the 6th. He went back out there in the 7th. And I think Hyde wanted to just keep him available for Sunday, which actually really worked out because Klum got a big strikeout, got out of a jam in the 8th on Sunday, and it was huge to have him available. But Klum allowed a hit, got 1 more out in the 7th inning, then came out of the game, only 11 pitches. I thought it was the right move. You know, it's a chance to get somebody like Yohan Ramirez in the game in the 7th inning with a 5-run lead. And Yohan Ramirez comes in and has a full meltdown. Now, it was only his 3rd appearance as an Oriole since they acquired him from the Mets. In the first 2 appearances, he was a little wild at times, but I thought the stuff looked good. He pitched almost 2 innings each time. I thought he was helpful to the Orioles in those first 2 outings. And I thought this was a perfect place to kind of get Ramirez in a little more high leverage spot, right? When you're bringing in guys at this point in the season, you're this good, you're bringing in a guy on waivers or via a minor trade. You want to see if he can throw in high leverage. You don't just want to toss him in there in a 2-1 game in the 8th. But, okay, 8-3 in the 7th, the leverage is a little higher because you're trying to protect the lead, but it's a 5-run lead. It was kind of a perfect spot to ease Ramirez in to be like, okay, could he pitch in high leverage, AKA this is kind of a tryout for him. Can he stay on this team? He did not pass the test. First pitch, he hits Adam Frazier in the foot. Next 3 pitches are wild, nowhere close to the strike zone, allowing runs to score. Then he walks a batter. Then he allows a single. And only because Kyle Isbell made one of the dumber base running mistakes I've ever seen, that is the only reason Yohan Ramirez was credited with recording 1 out in this game, because he allows a single. Isbell tries to go first to third on a 1-hop line drive single to left field, and Colton Cowser just guns him down with a perfect throw to third base for the 2nd out of the inning. The Royals, I literally think if Isbell just stays at second base, I think the Royals win that game on Saturday. Like, they would have had an even bigger inning if they don't run into that out, because the O's couldn't get anyone out. Brandon Hyde says, I've seen enough. Ramirez faces the minimum of 3 batters you have to face. He takes him out. He goes, it's Yennier Cano time. We got to shut this down right now. Cano does not do that. Single, walk, 2-run single, then an error by Ryan Mountcastle, something that really hasn't happened all year. He's been great at first base. And all of a sudden, it's 8-7 with the bases loaded and 2 outs and Nelson Velasquez at the plate. Luckily, Cano throws a nasty 2-2 sinker to strike out Velasquez and keep it 8-7. But even at that point, the bullpen's already just completely broken down. Coulombe's out. Ramirez is out. And Cano at that point, like, he only got 1 out, but he was so bad that he threw 15 pitches. He didn't have as good command. And you're like, I don't want to send Cano back out there. So you're looking down in the bullpen, and you've got Dylan Tate unavailable because he had thrown too many pitches on Friday night. Craig Kimbrel does not pitch 2 innings, hasn't done it in like more than 5 years. He just won't do it. You know he has the 9th, but you still need 3 outs in the 8th with a 1-run lead. And you've got Jacob Webb, Mike Baumann, and Keegan Akin available to you to get those 3 outs. And a couple of weeks ago, you would have said, oh, Webb and Akin will do it. Well, Webb hadn't been pitching very well, and Akin just got lit up the night before on Friday night, which we'll get to. So you're like, how are the Orioles, who can't get the Royals out, going to get these 3 outs in the 8th inning? And somehow, Akin for 2 outs, Baumann for 1, combined to get the 3 outs. I was very impressed. O's got an insurance run, and then Craig Kimbrel comes out there, didn't get a strikeout, but got, luckily, a 1-2-3 ninth to secure the save. And a cool moment for Kimbrel, who secured his 422nd career save, ties him with the should-be Hall of Famer Billy Wagner for 7th all-time. Colton Cowser caught the final out in left field. Should have been a cool moment. A ball that goes to Kimbrel. Cowser, quote, yeets the ball into the fountain in Kansas City. They have to go retrieve it. The ball is still in Rice in the clubhouse. Luckily, everyone's okay with Cowser. He's taken it a little hard, but another bit of tomfoolery by Cowser. But wow, it seemed like that game was getting very, very away. But the O's win it. The issue was, though, that was, at that point, the 2nd straight night of kind of an Orioles bullpen meltdown. And that's what we're going to get to finish off the pod coming up next. The one game they lost this series was Friday night, and it wasn't fully because of the bullpen. The offense didn't have a great day either. But the bullpen certainly had a terrible, terrible night at Kauffman Stadium. We'll talk about how bad it got for the O's bullpen on Friday night coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. It's playoff time in the NBA and the NHL. Baseball's in full swing, and FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. Bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on an app that is safe, secure, and super easy to use. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make your first bet an automatic win. That's at FanDuel, America's #1 sportbook. So to finish things out on today's episode, we do have to talk about the one loss the Orioles suffered this weekend. That was on Friday night, losing by a score of 9-4 to open up this series. Luckily, the O's came back, won the next 2, and took the series in Kansas City. But I'm going to get you the 5 things you need to know still from that Friday night loss. And the first thing you need to know is that Dean Kramer deserved a little bit better in this game. Kramer looked really good in this one, retiring the first 11 Royals batters that he faced. Kramer's final line on the night, I will say, definitely looks worse than it should have been. That was because the bullpen didn't help him out, which we'll get to in just a moment. But Kramer goes 5 2/3 innings in this game, allowing 3 runs on just 2 hits, 3 strikeouts, 3 walks, a homer, 91 pitches thrown, and only 5 hard hit balls by Royals hitters against Kramer in this one. And he was really cutter heavy. We've seen this before from Kramer at times, but 31 of his 91 pitches, 34%, by far his most used pitch, was that cutter. And he wasn't getting really any swings and misses, just 6 whiffs on the night. But it was cutter, 4-seam sinker was the majority of his pitches. He mixed in that splitter a little bit more. That there was a good article from John Mioli in the Baltimore Banner on Friday about that splitter. And then he ended up giving up a home run to Vinny Pasquantino on that very splitter on Friday night. But mixed his pitches well. He pitched much better than when he gave up 8 runs his last time out to the Brewers. And I thought he just deserved more. But he did fall apart a little bit late. 1 out in the 6th inning. 1-0 game. The Orioles are trailing, and he walks back-to-back batters. Salvador Perez is coming up. Luckily, he gets Perez to fly out to left on a first pitch cutter. Lefty on deck. Aken's ready. You're like, you've walked 2 batters in this inning. bring him out of the game. I totally understood why Aken came in there. That was a no-brainer choice. Kramer was over 90 pitches. He'd walk back-to-back hitters. It wasn't going to get better. But the Orioles go to Aken, and that's the second thing you need to know from this loss on Friday, is that the bullpen gave Dean Kramer absolutely no help in this one. Keegan Akin comes in, and to be fair to Aken, he made a really good pitch to the first batter he faced. That was MJ Melendez. Melendez kind of pulls a slider that might even not have been a strike, just barely rolls it into right field. Looked like it easily could have been a ground out, but it just snuck by for an RBI single. You're like, all right, it's 2-0. That was unlucky. Let's keep it at 2-0. Then Aken walks a batter, and then you're like, oh boy. And then Aken allows another little dribbler single. This time brings in 2 runs, and now it's 4-0. And then Aken gives up an absolute laser beam 2-run double, and in the blink of an eye, he only needed to record 1 out. He could have kept it at 1-0. It is a 6-0 game in the bottom of the 6th inning. And Aken, who had been really, really good this year, just kind of absolutely imploded. And then the O's, I'll get to how they did it, but they made it a 6-4 game going into the bottom of the 7th. You're like, they're right back in it. Dylan Tate coming on the mound. You're like, all right, he's been pitching okay lately. Maybe he can keep it 6-4. Maybe they have a chance here for a comeback. No, that would be single, fly out, ground out, single, and then MJ Melendez 3-run homer off Tate, puts the game away, makes it 9-4. Kind of a complete bullpen meltdown for the Orioles, except for the fact that Mike Baumann did pitch the 8th and very, very quietly had a 1-2-3 with 2 strikeouts. Nice to see for Baumann. Also got a huge out on Saturday, so maybe him trending in the right direction. But yeah, complete bullpen meltdown. Gave the O's really no shot in this game. Now, Adley Rutschman did his best. And the third thing you need to know from Friday is that Rutschman had himself a pretty nice day. First career grand slam comes in the top of the 7th inning after the Royals had gotten that big inning. The O's load the bases with nobody out in the 7th against Will Smith. I can't understand why Will Smith is still in the big leagues, but he is, and he is terrible. Then the O's go pop out, strike out, and then Rutschman, it looks like they're going to leave him loaded, and he just demolishes a baseball. Into left field from the right side of the plate for his first career grand slam, 398 feet, 103 off the bat. Makes it a 6-4 game. You're like, the O's are right back in this one. Rutschman had a nice weekend at the plate, had a nice day at the plate, was 3 for 5 with that grand slam, 4 hard hit balls. And, you know, he hasn't had the same on-base skills, and his power hasn't really super been there this year, but he's still really hitting for average, and he's still been a nice little table setter for the Orioles this season, and the power in the on-base will continue to go up, but good for him to get that first career grand slam. Now, the fourth thing you need to know from the Orioles' loss on Friday is that Ramon Urias was used as a pinch hitter for Jackson Holliday in this game. Now, the situation was bases loaded, nobody out against Will Smith in that same 7th inning, and Holliday was going to step to the plate lefty on lefty, and we know he's been struggling. And Brandon Hyde went to the bench and instead went to Ramon Urias. Now, we know Urias came through as a pinch hitter later in the weekend on Sunday, and he had a hit eventually in all 3 games. I was a little surprised it wasn't Jorge Mateo, because Mateo can also play second base and has generally been much better against left-handed pitching in his career. And Urias ended up popping out in foul territory, a 3-2 count, foul ball, then he finally pops out. But it does show, as I talked about already, that Brandon Hyde may be open to putting Holliday in a little bit more of a platoon until he really does break out, because it wasn't a super high leverage spot. I mean, you'd love to get a hit there and start the rally, but you are down 6-0. It's not like it's a 1-run game in the 9th. And he still pulled Holliday in favor of Ramon Urias, not exactly the greatest hitter in the world. Now, it worked Sunday, didn't work on Friday night. But again, it shows me, and with Holliday sitting against the lefty on Saturday, that the O's, I think, are willing to platoon him a little more until he breaks out. But again, they're not sending him down to AAA. And the fifth and final thing you need to know from the Orioles' 9-4 loss on Friday is that besides that 7th inning when they loaded the bases and then Adley hits the grand slam, the offense really did nothing. They were once again thwarted by Alec Marsh, who has had 2 kind of bad starts, then it's had 2 amazing starts against the Orioles. 2 weeks ago in Baltimore, he goes 7 innings, 1 run allowed. And then in this one in Kansas City on Friday, he goes 5 2/3 scoreless, 3 hits, 6 Ks, and 2 walks. Now, once again, the Orioles had a lot of hard hit balls against him, but none of them found grass, it seemed, and he was able to work through this game. The O's had a rally going in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, 1 out, didn't score. O's loaded the bases with 1 out in the 4th and did not score, so they had their chances. But again, the offense just kind of wasn't there against Alec Marsh. I don't know why it's Alec Marsh, but it's Alec Marsh, and I'm very happy to say that the O's will not be seeing Alec Marsh again this year, and that's the kind of nice part. Like, unless it comes up in the playoffs, which I'll start pulling my hair out because the heart rate was way up in the game Saturday especially, the Orioles are done with the Royals, and somehow, some way, despite what this team does to Baltimore, the O's finished with 2 series wins, went 4-2 against the city, and you will certainly take that. Next up for the O's, though, out to the West Coast. They go to Anaheim for a 3-game series against the Angels starting tonight. It'll also be their second series against the Angels. Of course, they opened the season in Baltimore against Anaheim, taking 2 out of 3 from the Angels. This Angels team coming into this one 9-13 on the season, definitely trending in the wrong direction. Reed Detmers will get the start for the Angels. He has been by far their bright spot. Detmers has been amazing, has a 1.19 ERA, 30 strikeouts in 23 innings over 4 starts this year. He's been great. And he did start against the Orioles in that first series, and he started the one game that the Angels won. 5 innings of 1-run ball with 7 strikeouts to 3 walks and 2 hits in that one. So the O's will go with that righty-heavy lineup. You'll see Mateo. You'll see Hayes if he's healthy. You might see McCann. You might see Urias as they try to figure out Reed Detmers on Monday night. It's a 9:38 p.m. Eastern time start, so might want to get a nap in on Monday. And the Orioles will send Albert Suarez to the hill for the second time in an Orioles uniform. Made his O's debut on Wednesday, 5 2/3 scoreless against the Twins. He keeps a rotation spot as he should. Now, Suarez was originally scheduled to pitch on Tuesday, but they keep him on 4 days rest. They move Grayson Rodriguez, give him an extra day of rest. He will pitch Tuesday, and Suarez will go for the Monday game. Now, if you've been a regular listener for a while on the Locked On Orioles podcast, you know that because of my having another full-time job, when they play on the West Coast during the week, it can be tough for me to be as regular with the podcast. Now, this is what the plan is looking like, at least for now this week. There will be a Tuesday episode of the pod that will recap game 1 between the Orioles and the Angels. It'll just be out a little later than usual. It'll be out mostly probably late morning on Tuesday instead of at midnight on Tuesday. It'll be out 10, 11 a.m.-ish on Tuesday is my goal, but there will still be a recap of the Monday night game. After that, we will see, but I'll keep you updated on that on tomorrow's episode. Make sure, either way, you are subscribing, commenting, liking the Locked On Orioles YouTube page where you'll get all the updates on the episodes this week. But I will be back tomorrow. Again, a little later in the posting time tomorrow, but we'll have a recap of tonight's game 1 between the O's and the Halos. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.